Hi, my name is Ken Lasseson. This video is intended for medical professionals who are wishing to have better information about how to address microbiome dysfunction, particularly stable microbiome dysfunction. Before getting into the process, I should give you my background so you know how to interpret. I have a Master of Science in Operations Research and Statistics. My master's topic was working with emergency services in Vancouver, Canada, in terms of survival rate for paramedics, cardiac patients being handled by emergency service, and then trying to identify which combination of drugs had a better outcome. I have worked as a data scientist, statistician, expert system developer, artificial intelligence person for Verizon, Microsoft, Amazon, and other companies as an employee. And I've been in the business for about 35-40 years. So I've seen a whole variety of different methods of trying to address problems. And because of that history, I tend to have a good war chest of approaches to solving problems, trying to get information teased from data and proceeded. I was a high school science teacher. I taught chemistry and physics at college levels and taught other courses in the third and fourth year for Chapman University, for University of British Columbia, and those courses were generally dealing with computer science. So with that said, for my background, let's go in and take a look at what I did and explain what's going on. Before going too far in, I should mention that all of my information is coming directly from PubMed studies or equivalent reputable sources, which has been extracted and put into a fact database. And the source of the data is generally available on the site with an easy click, so that you are aware that this is coming from reputable sources and not from internet urban medical myth, or professional medical myth, which does happen, unfortunately. Okay, so you go over to whatever data source you're doing. I'm going to demonstrate with Thrive. It is generally the best for US patients at the moment, both cost-wise and the fact that they present the data in a downloadable format, which is very critical. If you get a report which can be viewed only on the web, then you really are going to have a bit of a nightmare trying to work with it, because there may be 500, 800, 3,000 different bacteria with different numbers to it, and data transcription of 8,000 lines of data to be done accurately is a total pain. So you want to have an automated mechanism of uploading information to the site. Okay, so I'm going to do a login to my account on Thrive, which only takes a few seconds. Then I go up to Kit Status. As you can see, I've actually have 4 samples on Thrive. When Microbiome was business, I had regular samples done every 4 to 6 weeks there, which was extremely helpful. Now we go and we take one of the examples. Let's take this one. I just click on it, download it as CSV. My usual recommendation is that we add to it so that you're not confused later. The date of the sample, followed by your name or the patient name, as the case may be. Make sure you pay attention to where you are downloading it so that you can find it easily when you want to do an upload. So I'll click save there. A few seconds, it's downloaded. That's it, we are done. We can now log off the site or go across to the Microbiome site. Microbiome site has a whole large number of pages on it in terms of features, and you can go in and explore it, and it will take you a fair amount. You can look up foods and modify. You can look up what we know about any particular bacteria which are reported on a medical test. Not every bacteria, but every one which one or another providers reports on. And then we have things like medical conditions and end products. for example, bacteria producing methane, or what bacteria has been reported in medical literature dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome, UC, Crohn's, etc., autism. So all the information has been extracted and put into a database table, and you can view the results and the links to where the data is coming from. Okay, so we are here. Thrive is a 16S test. You go here, you see other providers for it, and Thrive is a simple click. I'm going to put in my name as Doctor Who. You don't have to have a real name. As long as after you upload it, you make sure you record login information. If you have a real email address, it's possible to recover a password to use or set up a password for it, or you just keep track of the information. And here we have the date, and generally you want to put in the date the sample was done on, if you remember it. If you don't, you can change it after the upload. And now we choose the file, and the file is there, and it's 1020, so I select that one, and I go and correct the date so it's consistent, so that when you look at a timeline, different samples over time, you have consistency there. Okay, upload and consent, and now we have it uploaded. You see I did it earlier, sample 2, and what we have is the login information. It's sitting right here. You may want to copy and paste that and save that somewhere so you can come back and look at it again. Again, here I'm using a case where the person does not wish to have any way of their actual identity being identified. So create a fictitious name. We'll provide you with a login information online, and that's it. So we have down here now, if we first take a look at microbiome view, you will see something. What you see is that we take the data which is in the file. So let's look at the data which is in the file. This is what the file we just uploaded looks like. It has a column header, taxon name, rank, order, class, phylum, etc. The actual name, the parent name, and then how many you have, and the count here is the count out of a million. So we have something like 28,000 out of 1 million, works out to be 2.8%. So you can convert to percentage if you prefer, but that's what the count is. So it's that information then gets uploaded, but as you see, family belongs to a order belongs to class, etc. So you have a hierarchy there. And when you upload it and go to my biome view, you will see the hierarchy showing what is being reported in a file. You also see, relative to approximately 1,000 other samples which we have uploaded, a whole variety of people, technically not all healthy control, but there's such a variety that we really can get by without having to have verified healthy controls for reference. There's some statistical magic there. Let's not get into that. It gets complicated fast. But basically, relative to a grand total of 1,000 different people, you can see where your values are outliers, and either very low or very high. Here we have high and high, but we have something else which is important here. We have samples. How many samples does this particular bacteria happen on? Here we have one which exactly 5 out of the 1,000 samples have it. In other words, this is a rare bacteria. Unfortunately, because most of these bacteria are only can be identified using RNA, are not culturable, we know how to identify them, but we may not know anything about them. We are unable to culture them in the lab. We don't know what they produce. We don't know what they feed on, and we don't know which antibiotics are effective against them. So the sparse ones are generally noise in one way. They're interesting if you will get deep into things, because you may be able to go over and go into the KIG data and get information that way. But for practical clinical purposes, we can largely ignore ones which has a very low incidence here. Now, so a few of them which are known to be pathological, yes, the fact that there's a low count and you have it, then definitely you want to take action. So we go down few, and we see here high, but not that many people have it. So whether or not it's significant is unclear. We go down here and we have one where we have most people have it and we have a high value. Another one where almost everybody have it, so a high value. So we have a whole bunch of bacteria here, and we have the ability here to mark bacteria to be included. You can go with the take everything and get suggestions, which means you also taking in a lot of noise, or you can say, okay, I want these bacteria and these bacteria only to be examined in terms of antibiotics, probiotics, diet changes, supplements, etc. So this one gives you the ability to just do a visual look and say, okay, wait a minute, I have no idea what that is, but that's too high, so I want to have that in the analysis. And if you click a couple things and then you can just click there, takes you back, and now it creates a hand-picked taxa here. Hand-picked taxa contains just 2 things, and that's interesting, but we can make things better. Suppose what we are dealing with is we are dealing with a medical condition. Just click on this particular button, and what we have is we have a variety of conditions. We have a chronic fatigue syndrome, because I'm biased towards that challenging thing is there. But as you can see, we have a whole bunch of other bacteria items. We have MES with IBS and without IBS. And the reason we have that is because we have explicit studies, and in terms of the clinical picture, they tend to be classified 2 different ways. So let's take a look at this one, and what we find here is we have a nice bright yellow things which match the medical studies that find that there are issues associated. For example, here we have a particular species, I believe it is a species, where typically it is high, and high is generally defined as being the top 25%. And the reason we say 25% is because most of the time the studies say statistically high or statistically low based on a group of patients or a group of controls. That doesn't mean everyone in the patients have a high value or everyone in the control has the normal range. These are averages, so there's fluctuation, and that makes it very hard to know what to apply for an actual individual. So as a way around it, I basically say, look, if it's top 25%, then chances are more likely that there's a significant shift connected to the medical condition which you have already identified clinically, and thereby you should consider it. I also have the top 7% level here so that you can identify if it's very high. So if it is high, you can just click here. If it's low, again, the same rule. If it's in the bottom 25%, you can click here to include it. I'm clicking here. Here's 125. Again, we have it's being high. That one we have it being low. By low, again, it's below the value which in bottom 25% of all samples. Never high and never low. Just click the ones you want, and you click that. It takes you back again. If you take a look at it, you will find that the ones you just selected has been added to the selection. You can go back and take a look at the Medical Condition Explorer, because we have chronic fatigue syndrome without the qualification of with or without IBM. A different way of looking at it, less specific, and we go down here and we can go and do the same thing if we want. We mark, mark, mark. Some of them will already have been marked and included, but some of them may not be. If you double include, don't worry about it. It will only include them once. And there, and there. So we now have hand selected from the person's microbiome the bacteria which are associated with chronic fatigue syndrome, which the pattern this person has is a general match for what is reported in the literature. We are trying to exclude random noise from other bacteria, which could be the result of diet, genetics, age, and many other confounders in terms of analysis. So we're trying to be a restricted set to the most probable bacteria. So we now have that list there, and let's run with it. Let's see where we go with it. We have a bunch of at species levels, a bunch of genus. We have one at the family level, and we have one at the order. The order and the family happens to be about the same. It's the same hierarchy, so it doesn't matter greatly. Now we go back to change samples, and now we have the ability to add 0 tags to the handpicked tag to 1. We don't need to do this because if you have 0, it shows up on the other chart automatically if you have 0 and it's a low value. So if you are concerned about a particular bacteria for some reason, you can add it in manually if the person has none of it. Okay, let's go over to handpick suggestion. It takes you over to a page showing you the samples and gives you a whole stack of options. Modifiers are things which are recorded in literature to increase or decrease particular type of bacteria. So we have a variety here. It's pre-selected. Suppose you are in the case of you are really only interested in prescription drugs, or at least at the moment. You can come back and for the same patient run a few and see what is suggested in terms of probiotics or prebiotics, vitamins, etc. So I'm going to click those 3 items. Now, we notice we have a lot of items which are species. When we at a species level, frequently we find there's very, very little literature. So we give you the option of including the species parent in it, and so we have the option there of including bacteria that are going to modify the parents of the bacteria. In other words, the bacteria could be bifidolongum, and by clicking that, you say anything that modifies bifidum will be included. So it is a way of making up for an absence of sufficient research to have what we really want. In other words, we are shotgunning or taking a broader look. We also have the ability to infer object by association. And this is a little bit more complicated to explain. We have found that certain bacteria tend to grow with each other. One increase, the other one increase, one decrease, the other one decrease. By inference means that if this bacteria has nothing to it, I mean nothing, then we will grab information from 10 other bacteria which grows or do not grow with it, which has a strong association, and we'll put 10 of those items, the strongest 10, in instead. So it's again a way for compensating for our absence of sufficient studies and research papers. So I'm going to click the 2 of them. I'm going to jack this up to 30 for illustration purposes. For 30. Note that the suggestions open up in a new window, so you can go see what they are, and you don't have to work your way back to this page. This page is still there. It's just in a different tab, so you can flip back, try different variations, see what happens. So let's see what happens when I click this. It now goes to the AI engine and proceeds to dig up a whole bunch of things. It goes and suggests proton pump inhibitors. Not sure how that one got in. It was misclassification. Hey, wait a minute. I've read studies about that particular antibiotic being used for chronic fatigue syndrome. And the microbiome we're working with is one which suggests that this one will be, I would probably be a responder to this particular antibiotics. I had the chronic fatigue. I'm into remission. However, there's probably residue. Zifamax, again, another one which I have used in the past, which has worked for me. Moxicillin, etc. So we have a whole bunch of different ones there. This is another one which is commonly used for chronic fatigue syndrome with positive results. Tetracycline, another one. So we have in here, we have a fair number of items which, if you check the literature, you will find there is a significant percentage who are positive responders to those particular antibiotics. Looks like we have a selection to pick from, and the main thing to consider is whether or not there are additional risks with them in terms of the patient, cost, toxicity, a whole bunch of other things which are medical questions which you are the one who are qualified to do it. All I'm doing is giving you suggestion. Now, the probability estimator, I should explain. Probability estimator isn't how effective it is. It's a little bit more obtuse. Since studies generally say is increase or decrease, and sometimes studies contradict each other, which becomes a bit of a problem. If we have two studies, one says it's increase and one says decrease, what's the correct answer? If you have two increases, one decrease, you've got to make a judgment call. So what we do is we see how many bacteria it impacts and how many studies it's in. And we basically do a computation, not a straight add-on, but a mathematical computation taking in all those factors. So the result is that the item with number one is the one with the highest value in terms of the number of studies, the finding that it has a positive impact on one or more of the bacteria we wanting to modify, and we tally them up, and the one with the most becomes one, and then all the other ones are relatively scaled. Again, it doesn't mean more or less effective. All it means is we have more literature supporting the use of this one than we have one down here. It doesn't say it's going to be a better one or more effective or requires a shorter duration of antibiotics. All it means is that we have less documentation that this will work. We have more documentation that it will work. So that's what the probability estimate is. The probability it will have an effect, not the magnitude of effect. So picking something on the bottom list is fine, especially if you have experience with it. Down below, we also have a list of antibiotics or drugs which should not be prescribed or evidence is against it. Sometimes you may find slightly contradictory, like here we have minocycline is a no, but up here we have tetracycline is a yes. So sometimes you get a little bit surprised, like, wait a minute, they're the same family, they should behave the same. What we have available for studies indicates they don't behave the same for some bacteria, and hence one should be avoided and one should be taken. A bit of a revelation there. And then we have, because I forgot to uncheck it, I have probiotics list, and basically there's nothing included for probiotics because I didn't ask it to be included, so I should have unchecked that one or have checked that one. Let's flip over and say, okay, let's see what probiotics and what prebiotics and similar should the same patient be taking to complement the antibiotics or other prescription drugs. And there we have a variety of them. The first one is Usually hard to get. It's been used in studies, but I don't think it's commercially available. Inulin is a nice, easy one. Probably already using it. Fructose. Lactobacillus casei comes up as the top one. Bifidobifidum, etc. And you notice there's a fair amount, some cases, with a prebiotic combination. Again, it comes on what the study described. If the study described those two, it goes in as a record. This one is, you could view it as being effectively the same. If you shove them together, you get higher value. That's the chicory, which is again inulin. Again, this comes from a study where it is explicitly said it's chicory. This comes from a study where it says inulin. They are, for most purposes, the same, but in order to keep facts absolutely clean and precise, they were recorded with the name that the study gave, which means we both have finer grade information, but we also don't have as much aggregation that some people would like. Items to decrease, for example, human male oligos is the top one there. Beta glucan, which means usually barley and oats. Particular combination of bifidobacterium. And we have things like xylene, mastic gum, etc. All of those are suggested to decrease because those will usually encourage some of the overgrowth or inhibit the undergrowth. Probiotic mixture, it goes down and spells out the commercial brand. For example, Mutaflor is there, which is the E. coli probiotic. E. coli probiotic Nestle 1917, which has been, as the date indicate, used for over 100 years in Europe. Available in Canada, Europe, Australia, not available in the US, unfortunately. At least until the FDA changes its mind about testing. Very recent, which is a Japanese probiotic, etc. So those are the ones which are strongly recommended, and their commercial name. And if you want to know anything about them, you can just click on here. For example, if I click Uranesium, and you find that it consists of only one strain of probiotics, and down below it indicates whether or not it increases or decreases, and this is roughly counts. So some cases you may have 50-50, which will indicate some studies says yes and some studies saying no. In this case, all the changes are there, and you can see we have identified from the literature which particular bacteria it is increasing or decreasing. You can go over and click on bifidobacteria, which I got a bug. Okay, and go on there so we can go back. And we have that as there. We can now go over and flip over to something like, okay, what vitamins and minerals should I be using? What type of food? Herbs and spices. How about flavonoids, which is one of my favorites? I'll get rid of the probiotic mixture. If you don't select probiotics, you won't get a meaningful result there. And what we have here is soy, green tea, wheat bran, reds, seaweed, rosemary, apples, particular mushrooms, whey, pomegranate, a different type of red seaweed, etc. Now it says item to decrease. In this case, vitamin B7 is a suggested decrease, B3, NAC. Some of these are actually things which are commonly used with chronic fatigue syndrome. So going off them, you may scratch your head a little bit. And again, these are suggestions only. If you really think they are needed, you keep on them. Okay, again, for myself, this sample was after I had effectively recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome. So I can well see why some of these common chronic fatigue syndrome items are listed there, because my amount of my need for those things have decreased. Down you have flavonoids and the same thing. And if you go down below, you see additional flavonoids suggested. Magnesium is suggested strongly, which is a very common chronic fatigue recommendation. Selenium is also suggested, which is often used in chronic fatigue syndrome. Quercetin is there, and if you click that, you'll find what foods has it. Capers, raw capers and canned capers beats the top. Elderberry. So you'll find here all the information courtesy of the U.S. Agricultural Service as to how much quercetin is in it, and you may find additional information, like for example, this is a mast cell stabilizer, which is sweet. Okay, so at this point in time, I think I'm going to sort of stop walking through. What we have is the general process. We have a health analysis, which is a very crude thing, but it does give you some information. For example, it says where your particular profile sits compared to other people's, and this person, or myself in this case, is very close to it. There's a naturopath in Tasmania, Australia, who has been quite active in research, and he has published his recommended levels. And so you can go down and take a look to see how well compared to recommended levels. Earlier I had clicked on Bifidobacterium and went to a bad page. This one should take me to the correct page. It does indeed. And what we have found is we have listed all the different names of this bacteria. Some bacteria has a lot of different aliases. We now have information as to which bacteria, so which lab produces it, and how often they show it up. And as you can see, Ubiome is where we have most of the data from. Unfortunately, out of business, which is problematic. Thrive is the one which most people are using, and we are quickly building up those samples. What this particular bifidobacteria produces is listed here. We have all sorts of additional information over here. We have interaction reported from conventional science. We have from citizen science. So let's take a quick look over citizen science. Is information which we have extracted from the samples, and you can see what fights or what increases. So you can see the relationship between bacteria this way, which can be informative for you to try understanding what's going on. And the size of the circles indicates the quantity which you have. So you have some big things which helps, or great help, but you have a very small amount of it. And then you have some things which you have large amount of, which you have a big amount of. So that helps to explain the bacteria interaction with each other, affecting one bacteria. If you go back and do it from conventional science, you will get a slightly, you will take you over to DataPunk, which will go and give you a listing of what each thing is. And we can go back from there. So all of that is a bunch of information. And what you will find down below is you will find a nice chart showing what the numbers from all the samples, and then showing you where your values are. So you see I'm down about the 10th percentile, and this is by the log value, which actually gives you a better looking chart to work with. If you want to convert it per million, then you see down here, as you see, suddenly we're way up here. Average value is much higher. And you can also convert it to by percentage. The chart is the same. As you see, it goes up. And some people have as high as 85% bifidobacterium. However, 90% are sitting at 4% or less. So these are outliers. These are unusual things which may have medical problems because they have so much bifidobacteria. Too much of a good thing can not necessarily be bad. And now we have down below, we have what a high or low levels result in terms of published medical conditions. For example, we have chronic fatigue is reported to be low, foresight said to be low, which jives with my particular irritable bowel syndrome, also reported low. So you are able to wander around and get a fair amount of information. And for example, let's say we want to look at irritable bowel syndrome here, and it will give you one of the studies. Hopefully, it will give you there are a few bugs still, but the data is sitting there, and that's basically it. So the whole bunch more information there to help you understand things. Probable symptoms may be of some interest to you. We have found certain patterns in the data where certain combination of bacteria seems to be strongly associated with certain symptoms. So here we are looking at not medical condition treatment, we're looking at symptom treatment. For example, let's take a look. Oh, here is one. I happen to be in the age group 60 to 70, and guess what? It classified me in the age group 60 to 70. Interesting that the microbiome can tell you your age. So we'll click that, and we'll go through. And what we have is of all the samples, we find out what range is the bottom 25, 50, 75, 100%. So that the numbers in each one of these should be the same number if there was no relationship. We go and take a symptom, in this case age, and split them out and drop them in and see what happens. We have here the p-value. As you see, we have some very respectable p-values. And where we have a match, we have a explosion. Where we don't have a match, we show ourselves, and then we show where most people are. And so you can go down and see what characteristics seems to match your age group. Now, whether or not you want to adjust your age group to match your to encourage your bacteria to shift to how old you are is an interesting question. I prefer not to have a 6-year-old microbiome. I prefer to have a younger microbiome. So I won't go about making adjustment that way. Other things of interest, enter symptoms is recommended in terms of giving back to this resource. By putting in symptoms, you allow us to identify symptom patterns, which means everybody benefits. We now know, oh, you have just symptoms, you have sleep apnea, or you have some other symptoms. If we find a strong bacteria pattern, if you adjust those bacteria patterns, chances are the symptom will decrease or totally disappear. So in other words, instead of randomly trying things, we are trying things with a goal of altering the microbiome to undo a particular pattern which is associated with a symptom. So we have things like neurological, go through and just click there, slow speech, hypermobility is a pretty rich group of symptoms and has been pretty nicely used by people. People have taken the time to go through it, and it has made a difference because we do find that we have very strong symptom to bacteria associations. As you see, we have a pretty long list. And for all of these items, it comes from people volunteering data. So it is a opportunity to give back to this resource information, and that information will probably benefit you in the long term. Okay, I've talked and talked and talked, so at this point in time, I'll leave you to go in and do more exploration. The goal of which is to hopefully identify if you are going prescription, antibiotic route, help you identify which antibiotics are the most likely to help. As you can notice, sometimes you get surprises, like doxycycline works, minocycline doesn't. And most of the time, you would have no way to judge between those two. Or I should say, doxycycline is more likely to help than monocycline is. So that's it. And again, all of this is based on existing studies. It is not necessarily the result of human clinical studies. So it's all a theoretical modeling construction. Okay,